Imagine that sound. The roar of nearly 80,000 people merging into one deafening swell. That was the voice of Rome. And this is its heart, the Colosseum. This stone giant isn't just an ancient arena. It's a living witness to how great and how brutal human beings can be. And its story, surprisingly, doesn't begin with triumph, but with fire and ash. Rome, 64 AD. The city is engulfed in flames. Most structures were wood, and they burned like matchsticks. Thousands of people lost everything they owned. And this is where Emperor Nero steps onto the stage, a personality who was, to put it mildly, highly controversial. To divert the crowd's anger away from himself, he found scapegoats, the Christians, whom he blamed for the fire. But hidden behind that smokescreen was a far more ambitious plan. Nero needed space, a lot of space, for his new grandiose palace. Right there, on the ashes, he began building the Golden House, Domus Aurea. Just imagine luxurious halls, endless gardens, and even a massive artificial lake. And at the center of it all stood a giant statue of Nero himself. It was a monument to his megalomania. The Golden House pond was so enormous that it was often compared to a real sea, and it occupied the very ground where the Colosseum now stands. Nero essentially seized a significant portion of central Rome traditionally reserved for public spaces. This was the final straw for the Roman people. The grandeur of his vision couldn't hide his selfishness and tyranny. But, as often happens with tyrants, his reign ended. The new emperor, Vespasian, was a clever politician. He decided the best way to win the people's love was to erase the memory of Nero and return what had been taken. He ordered the palace demolished, the lake drained, and something magnificent built in its place. An amphitheater, but not for the elite, for all the people of Rome. Thus, the Colosseum became a symbol of a new era, a gesture of reconciliation, and a demonstration of new, wiser leadership. The construction of the Colosseum began in 72 AD and took nearly 10 years. Just think about it. No modern cranes, no heavy machinery, only the insane and grueling labor of tens of thousands of slaves and captives, many of whom were taken in Judea after the destruction of Jerusalem. Stone by stone, under the scorching sun, in dust and din, they erected a monument that would outlive them all. Yes, the Colosseum literally grew out of bone and suffering. The most advanced technology of the time was employed for construction. The main material, Travertine, was hauled from quarries in Tivoli, about 20 miles from Rome. To transport these massive blocks, the Romans built special roads. To bind the blocks, thousands of bronze clamps were used. We'll come back to them later, making the structure incredibly strong and flexible enough to withstand seismic activity. Architects even used pumice stone for the upper tiers to lighten the structure and reduce the load on the foundation. It was a genius combination of strength and lightness. The result exceeded expectations. Almost 50 meters high, an oval arena almost 200 meters long, and a capacity comparable to a modern stadium, up to 80,000 spectators. It was a true masterpiece of engineering. They devised ingenious entrances and exits, called vomitoria, meaning to discharge, allowing the crowd to exit quickly. A ticketing system. Each spectator received a token indicating their seat. Underground tunnels, complex mechanisms, and even a giant awning to protect from the sun, the Velarium. Life buzzed inside, food vendors, souvenir stalls, and latrines. In essence, it was the world's first multifunctional entertainment complex. But of course, the main event was on the arena floor. And this wasn't just entertainment, it was a tool of power. Through blood and spectacle, the empire controlled the emotions of the masses. Gladiators, wild animals, public executions, all of it was part of a massive show that reflected Rome's ideology, strength, conquest, and mercilessness towards enemies. The common spectator felt like they were part of something great, and the emperor, seated in his box, unequivocally demonstrated who was in charge. So who were these gladiators? Heroes and victims of a bloody show. Pop culture loves to depict them as free warriors, but that's far from the truth. Mostly they were slaves, criminals, military prisoners, people whose lives were deemed worthless. The contradiction. Their status was highly contradictory. On one hand, they were social outcasts, infames, equated with prostitutes. On the other, they were superstars. Songs were written about them. Their portraits adorned walls. Their blood was considered medicinal, and wealthy matrones sought their company. They trained in ludices, special schools, on a unique, often vegetarian diet, rich in carbs to build up a layer of subcutaneous fat, which served as a kind of natural defense against superficial cuts. They were trained not for a quick death, but for a long, spectacular fight. Still, their path most often ended quickly and bloodily. Gladiators underwent rigorous training. Former soldiers taught them combat, endurance, and just as importantly, how to perform for the public. The arena was a theater, and the fight had to be beautiful. There were different types of fighters: the rotarius with a net and trident, the heavily armored cicator, the murmillo with a fish-crested helmet. Every match was a carefully choreographed production with elements of drama and unexpected turns. Hidden beneath the arena was a whole underground world, the Hypogeum, a complex system of tunnels, cages, and lifts. From here, wild animals were suddenly released onto the sand, and the bodies of the fallen were removed. The Hypogeum, whose name means underground, was the logistics center of the show. Its labyrinth stretched beneath the entire arena. Remember those 80 lifts? Each was a hand-powered mechanism capable of raising not only a beast or a gladiator, but also parts of the scenery to instantly change the landscape. Archaeologists recently discovered the remains of wooden ramps and wheels used for these purposes. The complexity of these mechanisms was so great that modern engineers call it high-level theatrical mechanics. Animals were imported from all corners of the empire: tigers from Asia, lions, and even hippos from Africa. The complex platforms, powered by the muscle of dozens of men, allowed for truly stunning surprises on the arena floor. Sometimes the arena was even flooded with water to stage reconstructions of famous sea battles, Naumachia. Though this was technically challenging and more common elsewhere, it happened in the Colosseum's early period. Or it was transformed into an artificial forest for exotic animal hunts. It was an ancient reality show where the stakes were life. And at the center of this entire theater, of course, sat the emperor. His gesture, a thumbs up or thumbs down, decided whether a gladiator lived or died. It was the climax, where power literally commanded life and death. Even the poorest Roman, seated in the upper tiers, felt part of a great empire. The Colosseum was a place where millions found an outlet for their emotions. But everything changed when a new faith arrived in Rome. Christianity, with its message of love and mercy, rejected the cruelty of the games. When it became the official religion, gladiator fights drew increasing condemnation. The martyrs. The early Christians, Nero blamed for the fire, often became victims of these very games. Their sentence was often ad bestias, to be devoured by beasts. Historians debate the exact number of Christians who died in the Colosseum, but in the Middle Ages, the arena came to be seen as a sacred site of martyrdom. This symbolism later saved it from complete oblivion, imbuing the stones with spiritual value. The last gladiator combat in the Colosseum took place in 404 AD, and, ironically, the games ended because of a simple monk named Telemachus. Seeing people kill each other, he rushed onto the arena floor and threw himself between the combatants, pleading with them to stop. The enraged crowd tore him to pieces on the spot. But his sacrifice, they say, so shocked the emperor that gladiator fights were banned forever shortly after. From that moment on, the Colosseum began its slow decline. It was used less, standing empty and neglected. First, it was damaged by severe earthquakes in the 5th, 9th, and especially the 13th century. These natural disasters caused significant damage, collapsing much of the southern side of the amphitheater. But the greatest damage was inflicted not by nature, but by people themselves. This is where the answer to the question of why half the Colosseum is missing lies. In the Middle Ages, as Rome declined, the Colosseum was viewed not as a monument, but as a giant warehouse of ready-made construction materials. Imagine a massive mountain of stone, marble, and metal right in the city center, and no need to dig. The Colosseum was converted into a quarry, or as it was called, a stone pit. The missing part of the Colosseum is literally what was disassembled and stolen. Stone and marble, thousands of tons of travertine and marble cladding were stripped from the walls and used to build new, more relevant structures. Bronze. If you look closely at the Colosseum's walls today, you'll see thousands of holes. These aren't random damages. They are the scars left by the bronze clamps that held the stone blocks together. They were deliberately prized out to be melted down and reused for weapons, coins, or even the ornamentation of basilicas. Where did it go? Many palaces, churches, and even parts of St. Peter's Basilica were built using the bones of the Colosseum. It was a bizarre form of the recycling of history. Thus, the Colosseum lost half its structure not overnight, but as a result of hundreds of years of constant plundering of its stone and metal. In the Middle Ages, it was a dark, abandoned place, a haven for the homeless, criminals, and its chambers were used as storage or even stables. Curious fact? It was during this time that scholars noticed a surprising phenomenon, a multitude of exotic plants growing within the amphitheater, seeds likely brought in on the fur of wild animals and the shoes of people from all over the vast empire. This was the only thing that truly flourished in the decay. The destruction was finally halted by Pope Benedict XIV in the 18th century. He declared the Colosseum a sacred site, dedicated to the memory of the Christian martyrs who died there. This new spiritual status stopped the vandalism and finally saved what remained of the great arena. Today, the Colosseum isn't just an open-air museum, it's a living archaeological site. Scientists continue to explore its Hypogeum. An ambitious project is currently underway to restore the wooden floor over the Hypogeum so the arena can be used again for concerts and exhibitions. This is the transformation from an arena of death to an arena of art. Every year on Good Friday, the Pope leads the Stations of the Cross here. The very stones that heard cries of death now hear words of compassion and hope. You might think that with modern technology it could be fully restored, but scholars consciously choose not to. Their position is that the scars, cracks, and destruction are also part of its history. If the Colosseum were perfectly restored, it would become a mere beautiful copy, losing its soul. But now, looking at those gaping holes, we literally feel the breath of centuries. The Colosseum seems to tell us, I survived all that and I'm still standing. That's why the Colosseum is half missing. It was disassembled by people and withstood the elements. In its stones are imprinted the ambitions of emperors, the fear of slaves, the courage of gladiators, and the curiosity of millions of tourists. It is a mirror of our civilization. It teaches us that history is not dead dust. True strength isn't in perfection, but in resilience, in not hiding our scars, but wearing them as signs of what we've overcome. Don't fear destruction. It makes you real. The Colosseum has stood for 2,000 years and will stand for 2,000 more. Because it is something more than just stone. It is history, carved into eternity. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, please support us with a like and subscription. More stories about the great mysteries of the past are coming soon.